Hi everyone. Welcome to MicroStation Configurations. My name is Sean McGaffick from Bentley Systems. This video will focus on changes to MicroStation configurations between MicroStation V8i and the MicroStation CONNECT Edition. The video is designed for those that have worked with existing V8i workspaces, but not necessarily just the experts in workspaces. The video discusses a part of MicroStation that every MicroStation user works with every single day, but it's hidden to the casual user. If you've ever created a design file and MicroStation automatically selected the correct seed file from the correct location, then you may have interacted with workspaces. How about a cell? You must guarantee to have placed a cell at some point. Did you have to look around for the cell library or design file to place it from? Chances are you didn't have to if you had interacted with a workspace. If you ever worked in MicroStation, selected a particular level, a text style, a dimension style, or even a report, and it was just available to you, you may have interacted with a workspace. My goal is not to make everyone that watches this video a MicroStation configurations expert, but rather so that we gain an understanding of what's changed between MicroStation V8i and the MicroStation CONNECT Edition, and what's needed to learn the very basics of MicroStation CONNECT configurations. So it's a video that's designed for experts and beginners alike. So exactly what is a MicroStation CONNECT configuration? Well, it's really a combination of what are essentially text files that contain configuration variables that point to particular resources or convey some form of information to MicroStation. And related to this are concepts like organization, workspaces, worksets, roles, and users. Altogether, they let you maximize your productivity by tailoring MicroStation CONNECT Edition to provide you a truly custom environment. Configuration variables are named entities. Some point to or specify exact location for files or directories that contain resources such as level libraries, fonts, cell libraries, and many others. Other configuration variables are set to provide particular values to control certain behaviors within the MicroStation CONNECT Edition. You will note what are referred to as flow directives. They begin with a % and may include statements, a variety of if and else directives. You will also see other directives, known as variable directives. Also starting with a %, they include lock, undefined, and a level definition directive. MicroStation configuration is loaded in a very particular order. We often refer to this as the levels of MicroStation configuration. Now keep in mind, all of this takes place prior to MicroStation starting. After we, for example, pick on the MicroStation icon, MicroStation CONNECT Edition begins with loading these configuration files in that specific order. The configuration is partly specified by system and application level configuration files that are delivered with applications or MicroStation, and they indicate the location of system resources. And that, of course, is dependent on where MicroStation has been installed on your computer. The remainder of the configuration is specified by configuration files that are customized by your organization for a particular work you're doing. These configuration files are typically maintained by an administrator within your organization. Every user organization has specific standards for the resources that are used in designs and for files organized on their network. In addition to organization-wide standards, there may be standards and file locations that are appropriate for certain subsets of the overall design work. For example, engineering firms may have clients that specify particular standards, or asset owners might use different standards for different divisions within their organization. The MicroStation configuration is designed to provide the flexibility to meet these varying requirements by defining a hierarchy of 7 different configuration levels at which MicroStation's configuration variables can be defined and augmented. Those configuration variables and their arguments are stored in text files called configuration files, also known as a CFG file. And as mentioned, it's loaded into MicroStation in a very particular way. Let's next shift a bit and discuss some of the changes from older versions of MicroStation. I'd like to start with what has not changed. The fact that MicroStation for years has provided a highly customizable configuration. This has not changed at all. In fact, it's a bit more organized and contains even more flexibility. Let me now introduce you to some of the essential changes in the MicroStation CONNECT Edition's configurations. We'll get a little bit more into detail later in this video. MicroStation Workspaces have become MicroStation Configurations. Essentially, Workspaces in the MicroStation CONNECT Edition are just one component of MicroStation Configurations. The System folder has been moved to // Program Files, Bentley, MicroStation CONNECT Edition, MicroStation Default. The Interfaces directory has been removed. Frankly, it's more like a relocation of its contents. Are you concerned? Well, ask yourself what was stored in the Interfaces directory in MicroStation V8i. GUI DGN libs with user interface components? Chances are that was probably the case. Well, they're simply relocated to the corresponding level of configuration, be it organization, workspace, workset, role, or user. More about these in a moment. Our standards directory, which was our site-level configuration, is now called organization. A brand new configuration level has been added called Workspaces. What was a project in MicroStation V8i is now a workset. A role level has been added in between the workset and user levels of configuration. Personal data is now stored in the operating system users directory in App Data Local. Let's take a quick look at MicroStation V8i. For many of you that have used MicroStation V8i, you know that there are 2 user-selectable parts of MicroStation Workspaces, which were User and Project. The user rarely was used to represent a true user. It typically was employed as a filter for a variety of purposes, such as to define a department or discipline. It also was not uncommon for organizations to use many different workspaces or combinations of users and project. A user would pick the appropriate user and project combination. However, there was no relationship between the user and the project, meaning a user would need to know that State Route 22 project should be opened and worked on only by a roadway user, or the plant user and the mechanical ventilation project. But we don't ever want the user roadway to open the mechanical ventilation project. However, in MicroStation V8i, there was not a way to prevent a valid user opening a valid project. This could certainly lead to issues with CAD standards, eventually causing issues for submissions of projects, printing, or just in general with the appearance of geometry. In the past, DGN files had no idea what workspace they were associated with. This would allow a DGN to unknowingly be opened in the wrong working environment, causing the wrong standards to be applied. Today in the MicroStation CONNECT Edition, we have what's referred to as branding. In actuality, it's the association of the MicroStation CONNECT workspace and workset to the DGN or design file. Let's start with terminology. In fact, the term MicroStation Workspaces has changed. A MicroStation Workspace is now part of a greater scope called MicroStation Configurations, where a workspace is but one piece of the larger MicroStation configuration. MicroStation CONNECT Edition is based on the concept of workspaces and worksets. This in effect replaces what was the user and project from earlier versions. You still, of course, have user selectable levels of configuration. In fact, the workspace is selectable. This could be thought of as we might have used the user level in the past. If your user was more of a group such as roadway, survey, or piping, then user is synonymous with workspace. You also choose what workset. Now this is a direct correlation to what was a project in MicroStation V8i. One note to remember is that workspaces are containers for worksets. MicroStation V8i projects become MicroStation CONNECT Worksets and are stored and grouped into MicroStation CONNECT Workspaces. Next, let's discuss MicroStation CONNECT Edition's levels of configuration. Earlier, I had mentioned that configuration files are loaded by MicroStation in a very specific order. First, system-level configuration files are loaded. System configuration files are supplied by MicroStation and provide default locations for certain resources and defaults for some operational values. Configuration variables defined at the system level can be overridden by any of the higher priority configuration levels. A word of warning: these configuration files provided by the system should not be modified by users. Next in line come application configuration files. These are supplied by MicroStation, Power Platform products, or third-party applications that are layered on top of MicroStation. They also provide configuration variable definitions that establish default locations and behaviors and should not be modified by a user. An example might be if you're a ProjectWise user, you might note a pw.cfg located here. After application, we have organizational-wide standards. Now this may sound new, but this is very similar to the standards directory or older site level of configuration. MicroStation provides a default example folder structure and accompanying standards.cfg that can be used as is or customized for your organization. This organizational level is used, for example, when you might have something that is needed across the whole company or across the whole organization. Let's say there's an engineer of record cell that must be used for all jobs or project across every client you do business with. Well, that might be an example of something that could be loaded at an organization level. Next comes the workspace level. This, of course, is the container that groups worksets, standard files, and associated configuration files that are used for a particular use. A bit broader than workset, but rather a workspace or client. Different user organizations have different uses for the workspace grouping. Engineering and architectural firms might use a separate workspace for each of their clients. Asset owners are likely to use a separate workspace for each asset or department. For that reason, the label or term that appears for workspace in the user interface can be customized. The default value is the neutral workspace. That label is customized in the workspace setup.cfg configuration file. Each workspace has one or more configuration files that specify locations for workspace standards and the worksets contained within the workspace. Here is where we might load DGN libraries that have been provided by a particular client for use on all of their projects, or what we call worksets. After workspace, we have the workset level. This was known as a project level in MicroStation V8i. Every workset is contained within a workspace. Each workset has one or more configuration files that also specify locations for the various files that comprise the workset resources and designs. In some cases, it's desirable to override standards supplied at an organization or workspace level with standards that are appropriate for a particular workset or project. That can be accomplished by the workset configuration files. Next, we have the role level. Some organizations want to override or augment standards such as level libraries, cell libraries, or other resources based on a particular user's role within the organization. A configuration file based on the role can optionally be provided by the administrator. Now, this is not active by default, but can be implemented by setting the variable _USTN _ role config at an organizational, workspace, or workset level configuration. The value of the variable _USTN _ role config defines a particular role configuration file that is then loaded at the role configuration level. And finally, we have the user level. Now, this is the user's particular configuration variable settings that are stored in his or her personal user configuration file, or UCF. Now, this is very similar to user in older versions, but you should know that the user is really now very personal to the user that is signed in or logged into the computer. In fact, every user of that machine has a unique preferences directory. Now keep in mind, much of what was contained at the user level in MicroStation V8i was and becomes workspace related. Now those folks that actually based user on a role such as mapper, survey, environmental, piping designer, or even project manager can be incorporated into the workspace level. Or a better direction might be to leverage the role level of configuration as mentioned. Now, back to the user level. When starting MicroStation for the first time, application data is created that is used by MicroStation. MicroStation looks for and creates a prefs directory in app data at this location here. Keep in mind, your first name.last name will obviously differ. This is how I log onto my laptop. Yours will differ depending on the username. The personal user configuration file, or personal UCF, and the personal user preferences file, the UPF, are now considered specific to the user's Windows login, very much like most applications and software these days. Now you might wonder how this is controlled. Certain seed variables can be set to point to corporate approved baseline versions of these personal files, including the personal DGNlib, UCF, and UPF. This would allow a copy from a server to be placed into the local user preferences directory. Now this allows you to always use the approved and proper settings files for each machine in your organization. Of course, this assumes you want to be able to control the local user preferences for standardization. Now there are several files of interest located here in app data. Your personal DGN library, which you might remember from past versions. For those that are not familiar, this is where if you just wanted to create a basic user interface modification that would only be for you, a My Tools toolbar or maybe a ribbon modification, these would be created in the Personal Design File Library or DGNlib. This is the location of the personal user configuration files as well as the personal user preference files. Others such as XMLs, extensible markup language, control the way dialogues are docked within the groups and user interface. Rich site summary or RSS feeds to control which RSS feeds are displayed as news feeds, and start screen, which shows which workspaces and worksets are pinned as favorites on that work page. If a user spends time editing the preferences, building tools, toolboxes, or customizing the ribbon, or setting up RSS feeds or pinning favorites to the start screen, these files would also need to be backed up. The contents of this location should be backed up to a secure location. Keep in mind that MicroStation will create it if they don't exist. MicroStation will create numerous files, including that personal DGN library. These files can be removed at any time using the startup switch minus restore defaults. Again, MicroStation will recreate these, but any custom setup would need to be restored. Let's look back at the levels of configuration we covered and compare this to MicroStation V8i's Workspace that was only offering some 5 levels of configuration. It only offered System, Application, Site, Project, and User. The MicroStation CONNECT Edition's configuration now offers 7 levels of configuration: System, Application, Organization, Workspace, Workset, Role, and User. I think you'll agree that we've not restricted or changed MicroStation's configurations in any way. In fact, we've expanded on them.
If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. If you want to see more such series, consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you, and see you next time.